Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me today. It's nice to be here. My name is Matthew Edwards. I'm a marine biologist and a professor of biology at San Diego State University. I grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley, where we'd take trips over to the beach on weekends and during the week, during the summers. When in my family, we talk about when I became a marine biologist. If you asked my mother, she would tell you that it happened when I was a young boy, about 9 years old, and the movie Jaws came out on the theaters, and my brother and I went to see it. And rather than coming home being completely scared about sharks, I spent the next several years researching them and cutting out pictures and drawing them and making reports about them and things like that. But I had forgotten about that for a lot of years. And then when I was in college, I was studying mathematics at California State University, Northridge. And I took a class to Mexico, to Puerto Penasco, Mexico, on the mainland side, at the very upper Gulf. And this was for non-majors because, I didn't know much about marine biology. And during that trip, I fell in love with marine biology. I fell in love with just about every aspect of it. Came home, told my parents that I wanted to change majors and be a marine biologist. And I think my mom's words were, "Well, what took you so long?" So I changed schools. I ended up going to UC Santa Barbara and getting my degree there. And then from there, after Santa Barbara, I worked for a while doing some sampling mussel beds for toxicology, traveling up and down the coast and working at a marine museum where I was a touch tank interpreter. And then I went to graduate school at Moss Landing Marine Laboratories in the Central California, up by Monterey. There I learned field research and how to write papers and grants and how to basically be my own marine biologist. And from there I went to UC Santa Cruz where I got my doctorate and did a postdoc up there, which is something you do after your doctorate as you're preparing to get a faculty job. I joined the faculty in San Diego State in 2002, and I've been a marine biologist here ever since. My favorite part of marine biology, I've been asked, I think, really has to be the travel. I mean, there's so many cool things that are out there in our own backyard, and I've spent the better part of 3 decades looking at them. But I've had the opportunity to go and do dive trips to South America, to Peru and Chile, to Mexico quite a few times. I've worked up in Alaska, in the Aleutian Islands, and the Gulf of Alaska. And you get to see these amazing different ecosystems. And one of the things that draws me to them is, as different as they are, how similar they are too, how the same laws that structure them and govern them are really repeatable. And gives you these tools to go in and when you see something happening, to figure out how to design experiments and to get in there and to know what to do to try to answer those questions. So I think that's probably my greatest love is traveling the world and seeing this amazing kelp forest ecosystems. As far as the process, of getting here, and I've told you, if you want to do this, this is something that takes some school. I was not the most engaged student when I was at UC Santa Barbara. I had other, interests, ski club and things like that, ultimate frisbee. But by the time I got into grad school, you got to devote yourself. You got to work hard because you don't just have to be good. There's a lot of people out there that are working hard. You want to make sure you put the time in. But when you do, if after education, after going to college and probably grad school, you don't have to. But then really you get your first job, and that's when the learning begins. My wife, who is a biologist as well, she works on the land, in the terrestrial side, in conservation biology. We have these discussions about the things that the challenges we meet when I go out to dive and try to figure something out, or she's going out to a grasslands and trying to figure something out, and the similarities and that we have. But once you do get into this field, I think it's incredibly rewarding. It's really fun. My work really focuses on subtidal systems, meaning below the surface of the water. A lot of marine biologists work in the intertidal zone, for example, or marshlands or things like that. I work primarily in kelp forests, And most recently, I've been working out on Catalina and something we call rhodolith beds, which are coralline algae that look like corals that roll around and create these amazing biodiverse habitats. Um, but we work in my lab everything from everywhere from California up through, spend a lot of time in Alaska. Like I said, we spend time in South America. We spend a lot of time in Mexico diving these different kelp forests and trying to understand the rules and the things that govern them all across this huge expansive range. You find that there's a lot of things that are going on there. Things are competing with each other. Things are fighting with each other. Things are eating each other. Things are shading each other out. Things are taking the space from one another. And you're trying to figure this all out along with the fact that, the ocean's warming. It's becoming more acidic. Storms are hitting. These storms come through and they just trash the bottom. Going down, you have really bright days. You have harmful algal blooms, these plankton blooms that have these toxins on them. You have boat mooring systems out there that are crushing the bottom. There's all these things going on. We're harvesting the kelps, so we're removing part of it and trying to understand how all of these different things play to to basically drive the patterns we see, to see why are the kelps doing so well in these areas, not so well in these other areas, and why are they completely absent for these other areas they used to be? Will they come back? And so these are the kinds of things we're doing. And in that response to that latter one, you may have heard the Northern California coast, the kelp forests have disappeared largely from up there. And this is due to a whole combination of factors, starting with this, where the intersection of the big predators that ate sea urchins were taken out of the system. And some of that by disease, some of that by hunting. And then when these sea urchins came out and the kelp forests up there, they were already in trouble because the waters had warmed. We had this thing called the blob, which is this really warm period of water that has very low nutrients in it. And we got an El Nino event, big waves, even warmer water. The kelps did really poorly. And once those kelps did poorly and you had all those hungry sea urchins, there weren't many kelps for them to eat anymore. And so they changed the way they ate. And now they're eating everything. They won't let the kelps come back. And so there's a lot of effort up there to understand what happens if you remove the sea urchins. What happens if you and do areas where you just exclude them, or do you actually have to remove them? Can you put up fences like corrals and get kelp to come back? So we're trying to understand these processes. We're trying to understand boat mooring impacts. So when you go out to Catalina Island and you're in these nice protected harbors, well, these harbors have these areas where you moor your boat up, have these heavy chains, and those chains pound the bottom, and they pulverize these kind of coralline algae, these like calcium carbonate bearing algae that are out there. And these algae provide home to a whole bunch of really small different invertebrates and fishes, and they're really important for the ecosystem, for processing carbon, and for nursery grounds for fishery species and all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to find out what the long-term impacts of these are, and how can we restore them if we need to. And then the other thing that we're really doing in my lab, which is a new line of research that was really brought into to my lab by two graduates from Humboldt State, Tori and Leslie. They came down and they wanted to do sea farming. They wanted to be ocean farmers. So what they did, and this is called aquaculture, and so they wanted to figure out ways of culturing seaweeds and doing it better, not just going out there and just finding some space and trying to grow seaweeds, but trying to ask, well, where, when do you grow them, how do you grow them? Do you start them in the lab? Do you then move them into the field? And so they've got a company called Sunken Seaweed. It's something you should check out, Sunken Seaweed, and they are working in San Diego Bay, and I teamed up with them. And now we're trying to see if can we use seaweed farms to clean the bay. You probably know San Diego Bay has all those shipyards where they're building boats. There's lots of boats that have copper paint on their bottoms to keep things from fouling them. And so the stuff leaches into the water, and we have lots of copper and magnesium, and we have lots of nitrogen and phosphorus that are flowing down from the city sewer lines and from all the people fertilizing their gardens and their lawns, and that stuff washes in, and from just all the industrial activity that's burning, that's got fossil fuels. This stuff is putting pollutants into the water, and seaweeds are really good. They're like sponges. They take up things from the seawater, and so the sea lettuce, this green algae that is called ulva, we're trying to figure out how to grow that on farms and seeing about cleaning up the Bay, and we're working with the Port of San Diego, who are really, really supportive of this and helping out in all these different ways. They're really actively engaged in this. So those are the kind of things that we're doing in my lab right now. Um, when we go into the field and you hear about all these different things, there's one thing that's really common in my lab that I like is that I work with a bunch of graduate students and undergraduates and high school students, and that everybody gets along and does their part. And so with all the different internships I've had from, like I said, high schools and undergraduates in college, they've come in and they join. A lot of them will join us in the field, and some of them will get to go scuba diving with us and help us out, and some of them actually get to lead different parts of the study. And so we have these interactions within the lab where everyone's working together. If we're in the lab, we're processing samples, or we're writing papers, or we've got quiet time because we're reading papers and trying to understand things, or we're in the field, in which case we're pretty much up at 6 in the morning, we're eating breakfast, we're hitting the docks, we're loading ourselves in the boats, and we're out diving. You dive in the mornings, eat, get some time to relax, off gas some of the gases that are built up in your tissues, and then you dive in the afternoon, and we're deploying chambers that are on the bottom that seal to the bottom and have oxygen, pH, and light and temperature sensors. We're doing that. We're running transects along where we run meter tapes along the bottom, and at random places we're counting and collecting samples to figure out who's there. So in these kinds of things, you get to do all that stuff. And in the lab, we've got these big racks of different seaweeds growing with different lights and temperature conditions, and we're spiking some of them with more phosphorus, some of them with more nitrogen, some of them with more just organic pollutants. And then we're taking samples from those things and measuring, putting them into the analytical lab, and we're using mass spectrometry. We're using elemental analyzers to analyze what's going on in their tissues and to see how good of biological sponges they are. So lots of different things. If you talk to one of my colleagues here at San Diego State, you'd get another 10 different things that they're doing. It's a really diverse career, something that really, really has a lot of options for everybody. If you don't dive, you don't like to dive, you work in the intertidal. If you don't like to work in the intertidal, you can work on ships. You can work in the lab growing things. Being a marine biologist is not always just underwater. Marine biologists come across the entire spectrum of all different kinds of things and activities. So what I would say is, if any of you are interested in doing marine biology for a career, start by taking a class in marine biology. That'll teach you. Now, don't get turned off if your very first class isn't interesting. Professors were people. Some of us are, more interesting than others. Some of us do a better job. Don't let that be your one thing, but maybe use it to spark your interest. And if you really want to do this, if you are able to, go to university or even out of high school, you can contact different laboratories around you and volunteer. Like I said, I've had about a half dozen students from high schools come in and volunteer in my lab. One of them actually presented a poster at a conference. I've had a whole bunch, once you've gone to college, I've had maybe 50 different undergraduates and their freshmen, sophomores, juniors come into my lab. Get involved. The take home from that is get involved. Don't necessarily wait for it to come to you, or for that, if you don't hear about it, search. You have got skills about how to search things. Search for marine biology opportunities in your area, on your campus, or on one of the campuses near you. There's a lot more out there than you probably realize right now. So if I were to do that, as far as mistakes, I've always been asked, well, what are some mistakes that you can do along the way? Well, you'll learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. I'll say that first of all. But don't wait for it to come to you. There's a lot of things opportunities out there, but there's also people out there who want to do them. So sometimes you gotta be the squeaky wheel if you want the grease. You gotta figure out. You gotta make the contact. You gotta step forward. You gotta walk into that office. You gotta have, the courage or the bravado or whatever you want to call it to walk in and just say, hey, my name is so and so. I really am interested in working here. I'd like to volunteer in your lab, and something like that. So be proactive. Be your best advocate. So that would be something I would do. So as far as other things you all can do, so again, my name is Matt Edwards. I am the Marine Biology Undergraduate Advisor and Coordinator at San Diego State. So if you're in the area and you're interested in this as a career, and you're interested, being a marine biologist, and I'll even show you. I have a shirt here that actually has kelp on it, and so you end up, if you want it to become part of your life, step forward and make the contact. And one thing you can do is you can contact my office at San Diego State for opportunities we have at our campus. So we have a number of opportunities here, a number of faculty who do work with students, and we have a graduate group, the Marine Biology Ecology Student Association. It's called MEBSA, through San Diego State. They are particularly interested in reaching out to students from outside the campus and from high school to get them engaged, get them involved. So you might contact them as well. And there, they can certainly tell you what's going on as far as the student's perspective. So what I'd like to say, everyone, is thank you for listening to at least my travels through how I went from a kid watching Jaws and then a math major in early college to being a professor of marine biology and getting to go cool places to dive places. And you've heard my kind of recommendations on things you might want to do to prepare yourself. Don't take one person's advice for certain. Talk to others, get other perspectives. Everyone has their own path that they'll take. But I would encourage you, whatever path that is, take that first step and get going. All right. Thanks. Good luck.